Living on top of Mount Olympus, the 12 main gods of the Greek pantheon watch over us. Well, they don't just watch over us, the thing is that they absolutely loved to meddle with the affairs and dramas of us mere mortals. It's like if we were the plaything of these so capricious, often very cruel gods. This might be one of the things that makes this pantheon so fascinating. The gods the Greeks worshipped were very human. They had flaws like everyone else. They represented certain aspects of the human reality: love, violence, the sea, the harvest, normal parts of everyone's lives, but taken to their maximum expressions. And as a numismatist, let me tell you, one of the most rewarding ancient Greek coins mini collection you can assemble is one featuring the 12 Olympian gods. It's a very flexible set to assemble. Coins featuring the Olympians are available in bronze. For example, you could go for bronze civic issues, which are often very affordable, but they're still full of historical significance. You can go for silver coins, which give you better than average artistry without being prohibitively expensive. And of course, if you're looking for the maximum expression of Greek art, you can go for gold. Basically, this set is available to collectors of all budgets. These gods appear on coins from all three main periods of Greek coinage as well. That means archaic, classical, and the Hellenistic periods. So you have this massive variety in the style they were depicted in. This wide date range from the 6th century BC to the early 1st century AD. So this gives you plenty of coins to choose. And finally, researching what coins you're going to buy to represent each of the gods exposes you to different art periods that help you shape your interest. It's a wonderful goal for any collector because not only having the 12 gods in coin shape it's really a sight to behold to have the 12 coins in front of you, but by the end of this journey of assembling the set and looking for each god and each coin, you will most likely have become a much better numismatist yourself. Now, it's very easy to find depictions of the Olympians on ancient coins. I mean, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, their equivalents on Roman coins, they show up everywhere, often on the reverse. But for this set, we'll focus on coins where the gods or goddess appear on the obverse as the main character of the coin. That helps keep things consistent and visually engaging. I also wanted all coins to be, how may I put it, purebred Greek coins, and it also puts you in contact with a broader range of coin types. So for these episodes, and that's right, episodes in plural because this will be a two-part special. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the second part. We are going to be enlisting the help of the Triform Collection from a gentleman who has a very nice taste for coins. He has a complete set of the 12 Olympians and we're going to be using it as an example. So, as I said previously, apart from the abundance of coins in all metals, here's why I think this project is worth doing. Probably a must-do if you want to focus on Greek coins. This is one of those rare collecting goals that truly rewards curiosity. I would recommend you start by choosing one god to focus on. So if you're just getting started on collecting coins, this will help you focus and not feel overwhelmed by the sheer variety of coins that are out there. You don't need to be a history buff to start small, you know? You might think, I don't know, like Ares, Poseidon, or Athena are fascinating. So it's as simple as picking a god from this pantheon you like. Then you start looking at the coins, what cities issued them, in what time period, under what monetary standard, and then you get exposure to coins. Look up on Google, watch this channel and my playlist for beginners, and focus on coins of just that particular god. Look into the coins, focus on the iconography, start comparing styles between mints, price ranges, until you find the coin that will serve as the cornerstone of your collection. And then, with that god in your numismatic pantheon, let's say, you get your first coin, and then you move on to the next. You only move to the next god and the next coin after doing extensive research on every single coin. So this way, you're not just filling out a set god by god. That's the important part. You will research and purchase coins one god at a time. This will help you methodically improve your eye for coins and develop real academic knowledge. You will know how to identify a good coin. This will help you get some market awareness because you're going to focus on how to do research prices on a single coin. This will help you also focus on a coin that will get you some technical numismatic insight. So you will see different examples of the same type of coin. This will help you become a better collector. This focus on a single coin that will expand your mental horizons as to what a good coin should look like. And of course, before we start, let me know in the comment section below what Olympian god you like the most. And if you have a coin that features this god that you really enjoy, let us know which one it is. Alright, let's begin with our numismatic Olympus. And today's video is brought to you by L5, the new ancient coin marketplace. L5 is a platform developed by coin collectors for coin collectors. It offers the lowest transaction fees on the market, from 5% down to 0. No listing fees or undisclosed reserve prices, and you can choose between buying and selling coins through its auctions or its fixed price lists. The most important idea behind L5 is generating an environment of trust between people. You can buy, you can sell, you can do both if you want to, all within a system of transparency and accountability between its users and the platform. Apart from a lifetime guarantee of authenticity in case any coin sold on L5 turns out to be a counterfeit, the platform works with a group of renowned experts on different fields of ancient numismatics and a body of expert moderators, with the objective of creating an environment of high trust where every single coin is reviewed by more than one person and curated by an input from the community. I think their concept of collaborative accountability, low fees, and transparency is a revolution to the ancient coin market, and I can't recommend the L5 enough. Give them a look. I personally think this is a wonderful concept that the ancient coin market was in need for. Visit l5.com. And we start with the big guy, the king of the gods, Zeus. Zeus is probably the most common god shown on coins. He really is everywhere. Throughout the archaic, classical, and Hellenistic periods, and even on Greek civic coins struck under Roman rule, he's shown in all sorts of poses, generally sitting on a throne, hurling a thunderbolt. These are very common scenes, but most often just as this very noble looking head with that unmistakable beard that gives him this air of authority. So why is he such a common sight on coins? Well, it has a lot to do with what coins were supposed to represent. Coins have always been a symbol of political authority. They would tell people things like, this city-state is functioning, the kingdom has power, the person named in this coin is who Zeus decided would be in charge. That's because Zeus, more than any other god, embodied the very concept of legitimate rule. Because, well, he ruled over the gods themselves, so of course he held power over us, mere mortals. And for the Greeks, this idea of personal authority, of independence, was a really big deal. Their world was fragmented, and your own native polis was the only place you truly had a voice in state affairs and where you could exercise your full rights as a citizen. So it was that small place, that tiny little city in a huge world, the only place where you really mattered, where you had the connections to be someone. So this means ensuring the independence, the prosperity of your city was closely tied to your own potential of living a prosperous life. So when the citizens of a polis or a king, as kingdoms became more prevalent in the Hellenistic period, when they put Zeus on their coins, this was much more than just a display of piety. They were making a claim, like our authority is just. It's enforced by our collective efforts, and the fact we are independent means this independence is sanctioned by the cosmic powers. Zeus gave us this independence. And it's really interesting because Zeus was also different in a way that he wasn't a god of personal piety in the way some other gods were. He wasn't like your household protector. So let's say, for example, if you were a soldier, you would maybe pray for Athena or Ares for personal protection in war. It worked differently with Zeus. He was more about the big picture. He upheld order in the universe. He settled disputes. He ultimately decided the fate of any power struggles. He represented this structure, this hierarchy in the universe. The Greeks had this concept, semnotes, that Zeus emanated, this innate dignity, authority, like the act of having unquestionable influence over things. The Romans would later adapt this concept to their idea of gravitas, influence, and all that made Zeus this serious, this important character, made him a very fitting image to be used on coins. So now that you understand Zeus, let's show one of the coins featuring him. This piece, with this lovely portrait of a bearded Zeus wearing a laurel crown, is a really interesting example to explain Zeus because its issuer had a really unique relationship with power and authority. What we have here is probably a hemilitron or a hemidrachma, struck in ancient Syracuse. This particular coin is dated between 332 and 317 BC and is attributed to Timoleon, a man who assumed the title of Tyrant of Syracuse. Tyrants rose to power in times of crisis to defend the city, but very often when you give someone unlimited power, they aren't really willing to give it back. So Syracuse had lots of tyrants who didn't give up power after their crisis was over, but Timoleon, he actually stepped down and returned to private life after restoring democracy to Syracuse. The inscription around Zeus reads, Zeus Eleuterios, Zeus the freedom giver. Freedom giver. It's a really interesting reference to Timoleon getting rid of all tyrants of Syracuse and the rest of Sicily during his time. But it's also an interesting touch to see he did not mention himself directly on coins. He preferred to just give all of the credit to Zeus himself. This would be one of the, because it's counterintuitive. This would be one of the easiest and most effective strategies of personal propaganda a tyrant could use. Put his name on the money. But Timoleon chose not to do it. So maybe his reputation as one of the men of great virtue of antiquity really is deserved. On the reverse, we have a complement to the image of Zeus. We have his thunderbolt. If you aren't used to ancient iconography, this might look like a very weird thunderbolt, but well, that's one of the ways they made it. Notice that it has something like a handle at its center, a part where Zeus would literally grasp the thunder and use it to aim at whoever was going to receive a jolt of lightning on the face. To the right of the main design, we have also like a small eagle, another symbol of Zeus, his symbolic animal. He used an eagle to carry his messages across. And around the borders of the coin, the name of the city, Syracusion, something like coin of Syracuse, coin struck by the Syracusans. Moving on from the king of the gods, we have the queen of the gods, Hera. Hera had it rough. Her husband might have been the most powerful god in the pantheon, but one thing he was not was a faithful husband. Many of the other Olympian gods and some of the legendary demigods of Greek mythology were the fruit of Zeus' extramarital affairs, and Hera hated it. She constantly cursed and dedicated her time to torture some of Zeus's bastard sons. One of the most famous examples are the stories of Heracles, the demigod son of Zeus, with a mortal woman. She constantly tried to kill Heracles, and since she didn't manage to do it, she made sure he would at least have to deal with lots of torment. Different to her husband, Hera doesn't show up very often on coins. In Greek mythology, she embodied the formal structures that held society together. Institutions like marriage. Let's remember, marriage back then wasn't decided based on love. It was a social institution meant to unite families, formalize alliances, and ensure wealth was maintained in certain families. She also represented the idea of legitimacy, like the legitimacy of sons and daughters. That means the continuation of your family lineage. And it went beyond this smaller scope focus on the family. She more like represented the sanctity of any civil institutions, the conventions that kept society together. She wasn't like this goddess of romantic love. There was another very famous goddess responsible for that. Hera oversaw like the structured hierarchies that allowed families, and even like cities and kingdoms to function. On coins, she often shows up in contexts that emphasized this idea of dynastic legitimacy. That's also why we often see her with Zeus on coins, either on the same coin or they show up together in different denominations of the same monetary standard, as she complemented the idea that Zeus passed on coins. Here in this Trihalcon, struck at Thessaly around the 4th century BC, we have her image wearing a veil over her head, evoking this idea of like dignity, permanence. It's easy to grasp the complementary idea to Zeus when we look at her through the perspective of coinage. It's like if Hera was a stabilizing presence next to the sheer power of Zeus. And just like her husband, she wasn't a popular figure for personal devotion. She was most often worshipped in civic ceremonies, open to the eyes of the public, as everything related to her was tied to the ideological foundations of ancient Greek social order. On the reverse of this coin, surprise, surprise, we have her husband once more. This time it's an image of Zeus standing, holding his scepter and his thunderbolt on his other hand. The legends read Perhaibon, making reference to the Perhaiboi, the people who issued this coin. That's also an interesting twist to this coin. It doesn't mention the city itself that made the coin, but rather the people who made it. That's an interesting reinterpretation to the idea of civic pride of the Greeks. Rather than being connected to the polis, to the physical city, it was connected to the people, the bloodline, one could say. When we think of this way, the choice of Hera as the goddess of lineage of institutions actually makes perfect sense, right? She was more like a personal thing to this idea of legacy. I mean, wonderful little coin. It's not the most visually impressive of them all, but it gives us this unique glimpse as to how the Greeks saw the difference between the physical city and the people that lived in it. Now, I know I mentioned Hera was always pissed at Zeus for having lots of extramarital affairs, but they at least had some legitimate children between them. One of such children was Ares, the god of war. Actually, that description is a bit of an oversimplification. War was part of life for the Greeks, so different gods represented different sides of war. Athena was also heavily influential in the affairs of war, but she had a more, I'm not even sure how to put it, defensive aspect to it. Ares was the god of just bloodlust, of violence. He personified like this chaos, the noise, the fury, the brutal things in war. And precisely because of that, he wasn't exactly loved in Greek religion. In fact, he was often portrayed as like this mindless, destructive, sometimes even dishonorable god. But that's exactly the beauty of the Greek pantheon. It showed the realities of the world, and the ancient world was very violent. Conflict between city-states was common. So having a strong military was absolutely necessary for your survival as a polis. This of course represented a big economic hurdle that made everyone's lives less prosperous. So whether the Greeks liked him or not, they just had to deal with the fact that Ares was there, he was a reality. So on coins, Ares is relatively rare occurrence because he had this malevolent nature, and when he did appear on coins, it was usually done on purpose. So he tends to show up when a city or a ruler wanted to emphasize military strength, maybe more than that, ruthlessness, this don't mess with me attitude. And that's exactly what we have here. This fairly large bronze coin was issued by the Bretian League between 214 and 211 BC. This was a people that inhabited southern Italy. The Breti used the opportunity of the Second Punic War between Rome and Carthage to rebel against their Roman overlords, declaring themselves independent and siding with Hannibal. During this very brief window of independence, they issued their own coins, and Ares was one of the chosen designs. And well, it made sense. If they were going to take the opportunity and try to make a move for their independence, they might as well show a warlike god on their coins. Here Ares is ready for combat, very serious expression, wearing his very decorated helmet over his head, scanning the horizon for danger. Wonderful design, really. That's a great looking coin, despite the wear. On the reverse, we have a scene where Nike, the goddess of victory and messenger of Zeus, is crowning a battle trophy. To her right, there's an inscription, Bretion, or coin of the Britians. Unfortunately for the Britians, this very defiant message on their coins didn't do them much good. The Romans, starting in the 210s BC, began recovering lost ground, advancing down the Italian peninsula, and little by little they retook the Brescian territory, disbanding their league and harshly punishing the rebellious peoples that broke off from Rome's control. Still, their attempts at power at least left us with some very pretty coins. Now, the Greeks were not known as mindless warriors. On the contrary, none of these attributions to Ares were really that connectable to how the Greeks waged war. I mean, they came up with the phalanx, the hoplite war, very complex strategies, and they had a deity that protected those who fought in this organized way. This was Athena. It's actually surprising at first to think Athena was so connected to war. She is known in common culture as this goddess of wisdom, philosophy, as this guardian of the Greek civilized way of life. And she's also very often seen on coins. As the daughter of Zeus, she obviously held a lot of personal authority herself, but different to her father, she embodied a more benign, more personal idea of protection, of wisdom, which might have been more approachable to your average Hellene looking for a god to ask favors to. However, if you pay attention to her iconography, there is a reason why she was also depicted wearing a helmet. Just like her half-brother Ares, she was a goddess of war. Her kind of warfare, of course, was different. It was a planned way of making war, what the Greeks called strategos, the strategic way of waging war. That's why she was said to protect those, for example, fighting defensively, protecting their own territory. You're probably expecting me to show the super famous Athenian tetradrachma featuring her portrait and that little cute owl of Athens on the reverse, but I'm gonna show you something different today. We are once again looking at a southern Italian coin. This is a didrachma, or a nomos, struck by the Taurioi, people that lived in the region of Lucania, right at the very bottom of the Italian peninsula. This particular coin is from around 410 BC. Now, the people who founded this city were colonists, coming from an expedition organized by Athens. So it's not a surprise they brought their original civic symbol of Athens to their new coins. But what I really love about this piece is that they completely changed her design. The basic concept is the same, the goddess wearing her helmet, looking right, but everything has been redesigned. Her helmet is much more complex, more in line with a late classical style, while the original Athenian coin looks more early classical, maybe even a bit archaic. The crest on her helmet is more elaborate, the decorations on the helmet are also more complex. The original has just a few leaves, while this one has this wonderful scylla, a sea monster encrusted on the helmet. It's amazing. And the face of Athena is also made in a more realistic proportion. Her eyes are looking sideways, as they should be, rather than front-facing like the original, which I always thought gave it a distorted effect. And I don't know, some people might prefer the Athenian tetradrachma. It's higher relief, it's bigger, it's a more famous coin, but I personally just like this one better. It's a more delicate, more refined coin. On the reverse, we have a bow. The bow was a connection to the old people that lived in the area where the Taurioi established their new colony. Previously, there was a city in the same site called Sybaris, but it was destroyed by its more powerful neighbors. Some of the original colonies of the new Thouri, the new city, were descendants of refugees of Sybaris who fled to Athens in search for help. So here we have this very nice bowl charging to the right, and above it the inscription Toureon, coin of the Taurians. That's another interesting kind of legend, making once more a reference to the people more than the name of the city itself. And that was a very smart move. The colonists were, after all, a mix of Athenians, refugees of Sybaris, a few Spartans, and other Hellenes, so establishing a new civic identity to these people coming from different places must have been really important. In fact, we know it was important, and it was pushed by the elites of the city, because after its foundation, factions of Spartans and Athenians who lived in the city, they started entering in conflict when they found out that the Peloponnese War had just broken out back in the Greek mainland between Athens and Sparta. So the people of that administered the city wanted as much as they could to unite the people, because otherwise the city was bound to fail again, right? I don't know, it's just a wonderful coin. Imagine that, a brand new city trying to make its very first coins and establish its civic identity. Okay, let's keep going. Did you know that one of the 12 Olympians was Zeus's brother rather than one of his sons? That would be Poseidon, the god of the seas. Well, he did not only represent the sea, it went much further than that. He was also the god of, he was the god of raw elemental power, of the forces of nature, in a sense. Earthquakes, storms, he caused these whenever he was angry. If you ever look at a map of where the Greeks built their cities, you will come to the conclusion they were like crabs. They lived only in the coastline. So the sea, the dominion of Poseidon, was very important to the Greeks, and control over the sea meant control over everything. Trade was done through the sea, traveling by boat was quicker and more efficient. The Greeks were great colonizers, so that was done by sea as well. Lots of their food sources came from the sea, since arable land on the rugged Greek landscape was hard to come by. So much of Greek life was tied to the sea, so Poseidon ruled over a huge part of their everyday life. We often find his image on coins from coastal cities, of course. Putting a god on a coin was seen as a dedication given to the god, and since your power depended on the sea, it was wise to be in the good books of Poseidon. Here we have another coin of Syracuse. This one is a litra, issued under Hieron II between 270 and 215 BC. This is a very common type, probably one of the most common bronze coins issued in Syracuse and the most common one to feature Poseidon. Probably one of the easiest portraits of Poseidon you can find in the coin market right now. On the obverse we have the bearded portrait of the god of the sea, quite a nice beard, just like his brother Zeus, but to show that maybe Poseidon was in a slightly lower position compared to Zeus, the die engraver decided to give him just a plain cloth diadem on his head, rather than a full, glorious laurel crown like Zeus. And on the reverse we have another symbol of Poseidon, his trident. He could create storms and earthquakes just by pointing at someone and shaking his trident. So what we have here are the 3 tips of the trident pointing upwards, and the design is flanked by a couple of little dolphins. At the bottom, next to the base of the trident head, we have this kind of socket that would probably attach to the rest of the shaft. And we have the inscription Hieronos, Hieron, naming the current tyrant of Syracuse. Wonderful little coin. Okay, so how about one last god before we wrap up part 1? Let's have a look at yet another son of Zeus, Apollo. Now Apollo is really interesting. He has this wonderful, beautiful side to him. He was the patron of music, poetry, any kind of art really. Healing, not medicine, that was Asclepius's reign, but Apollo, the act of healing, of becoming better, of being blessed with cure, that was under Apollo's authority. He also allowed oracles to come up with prophecies. He was always shown as this beautiful man, that idea of light, clarity, harmony, the things that gave beauty to the world. Not necessarily what made the world fun. This was more a Dionysus thing, which we will discuss next week. Apollo was more connected to the idea of beauty. But he also had a dark side. When angered, Apollo could send plague and death. In the opening of the Iliad, there is a clear show of his dark side, where he sends disease into the Greek camp with his arrows. Those arrows, the bow and arrow, are also an interesting part of his imagery. They don't always show up on coins, but one of his symbols was the bow and arrow, and these represented the power of the gods over men. You know, sudden disasters, sudden death, this idea of divine punishment, of being struck down by sheer chance, or even better, by divine will. This was central to the image of Apollo. It was like a reminder that, yes, you little mortal, you have lots of beautiful things in life that you can enjoy, but you are still the plaything of the gods. And when we, the gods, feel like ending it all for you, Apollo will just point an arrow straight at you. He never misses, and just like that, poof, you're gone. But even with this dark side to him, people seem to have had quite a positive thing for Apollo, because he's another fairly common deity to be shown on coins, and it's always that beautiful side of him. This coin we have here was issued under the Breti, the same people that from that coin of Ares we saw earlier. But this one was made a bit earlier, between the 280s and the 220s BC. It's interesting how, despite the Breti not being ethnic Greeks themselves, they were pragmatic in understanding that the area they lived in was filled with Greeks, and Greek was the spoken language for most people, so coins used in commerce from all of these cities also were issued in Greek, so they just made their own coins in Greek as well to align to this reality. So here in this obverse we just have this wonderful image of Apollo made in this fantastic Hellenistic style. And on the reverse we have another wonderful, this coin is so good. So we have a tripod. Tripods were common pieces of furniture for the Greeks. Some were used to light up flames, to provide light and warmth, but what we have here is a ceremonial tripod. These were used in religious ceremonies to burn offerings to the gods. You would light up a flame, burn an offering to the gods, and as the smoke of the burnt offering rose up, it was said to be taken up to the gods to receive your offering. It makes me feel almost like if this was a device to connect with the gods in a way, like a telephone to the gods. The fact this particular one we see here is so richly decorated probably indicates this must have been a ceremonial variety rather than a utilitarian tripod. Anyways, around the design we have the inscription Reginon from the Regions. making a reference to Region, a city controlled by the deity that issued this particular coin. And here we have part 1 of this special of the 12 Olympians. Now, remember to leave a comment telling us what your favorite coin featuring one of the Olympians is. Once more, thank you to the Triform Collection for sharing his coins with us, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss part 2 next week. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon! Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.